My wife and I celebrated our anniversary yesterday. And that wasn't for the clap. Yes, thank you. I can tell you with absolute certainty that 22 years ago today, Easter Sunday fell on this day as well. And the reason I know that, for any people who are engaged and not married yet, the best time to get married is the day before Easter. You want to know why? Because you don't got to buy flowers. You just find yourself a church that likes pretty flowers, and you get married there and use their flowers. That's how I know, okay? But yeah, you are all here. It's Easter Sunday. I hope you're glad to be here. I know you can see that giant bright slide because all of you just lit up in front of me. So it's Easter Sunday. And so just to give you some history, Easter actually existed before Jesus. Easter, as a holiday, existed before Jesus. It was a day that celebrated the coming of spring, and it was a pagan holiday. But here's the deal. Some things happened around this time that changed the game. In fact, if you were here with us last week, you heard Pastor Mark share, and thank you for your message last week, about Jesus' entry into the town on a donkey and people waving palm branches. We call that Palm Sunday. And they're saying, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, as Jesus entered the city. And then within a few days, Jesus finds himself in an upper room with his disciples as they share communion together. And also what happens is he calls out the person who he knows will betray him, a man named Judas. And then the very next day, Jesus is arrested. And he's found guilty by the people. And he's hung on a cross to die. And as he's hanging on the cross, he does die. Like not fake death, not gotcha, I'm not really dead. He dies. And they bury him in a tomb. But something happened. 3 days went by, and the tomb was empty. And that's what we're celebrating today. When something that big and that vital happens in the world over the course of a week, Easter gets redefined by the life of Jesus. So what happened to Easter? Well, for some people, it's still a celebration of spring. But for the Christian church, Easter is very, very different. It's the celebration of a risen Jesus. And that's why we're here today. So whether you're with us every Sunday or once a month, or maybe this is your once a year visit to the church, I just want you to know you're supposed to be here. There's no judgment. I'm glad you're here, and I believe the message of Jesus can actually change our lives. So, if you're ready, say, I'm ready. I believe you. So let's jump in. We're going to be in Matthew chapter 28 for a little bit. So, in Matthew chapter 28, it says this: after the Sabbath, at dawn, everybody say at dawn. At dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. So these women are going to the tomb to see what's going on. There was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord, check this out, the angel of the Lord came down from heaven and going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. Think about that. Like, you're walking to the tomb where people are dead, right? You show up, all of a sudden the earth starts shaking, the stone rolls away. There's an angel sitting on top of the stone, and he looks at you and he goes, "What's up?" That doesn't happen every day, right? I mean, we don't know what this angel looked like, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't like this dainty like fairy with wings and little like sparkles around them. We're talking like a warrior angel sitting on top of a stone. You walk up to see a dead person in a tomb, and he's just sitting on it. Hey. Goes on to say this. It says, his appearance, talking about the angel, was like lightning, and his clothes were as white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. Okay, there were guards posted, not by Rome, but by the Jewish community, because they knew that there was this thing about Jesus raising from the dead, and they wanted to make sure the followers of Jesus weren't going to sneak in at night and steal the body and say he was still alive. So they're all there. They see the same thing the women saw. The stone rolls away. The angel's sitting on top of the stone. He looks at the women and he's like, "Sup?" And they're like, "Whoa." He looks at the soldiers and he's like, "Sup?" And they all pass out. Now, I'm not going to make any sort of judgmental, sexist statements about how women respond to stress versus men, but I do want it to be noted that all the soldiers passed out. Okay? So the women seem to be fine. The men are all with their like shields and spears are all laying on the ground. And it says they shook and then they became like dead men. So I made sure to look up that word dead men in Greek to see what its actual meaning was. And it means dead men. Okay? So it's just a thing. They passed out and now the angel is left there with these women. The angel said to the women in verse 5, "Do not be afraid." Okay? For I know that you are looking for Jesus. He's saying to them, I know why you're here. You're looking for Jesus, who was crucified. He is not here. He has risen, just as he said. Throughout Jesus' time with his disciples, he literally told them, I'm going to die and raise from the dead 3 days later. And they were like, we don't get it. And here we are, he's like, the angel's saying, like, he told you this was going to happen, and it's happening. He said it, it's a thing. He's not here, just like he said he wouldn't be. And then he says, come and see. Everybody say, come and see. Come and see the place where he lay. Then in verse 7, then go quickly and tell his disciples, he has risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Now I have told you. So the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid, yet filled with joy. You see that? Like they were totally freaked out. But it was awesome. It was awesome. Afraid, yet filled with joy. And they ran to tell his disciples. In verse 9, suddenly Jesus met them. Greetings, he said. Now, I expect Jesus to say something a little bit more profound here. Like, this is the risen Jesus. He's meeting these women as they're starting to run away. I expect like it is I, the Son of God, or something like, you know what I mean? Like something like powerful. And he's like, sup. You know? He just says greetings. He says that to them, and then they came to him, clasped his feet, and worshiped him. And folks, if you hang out with us one Sunday a year, and it's this one, this is the only sermon you get to hear every year. The tomb is empty. The people were excited. He is risen, right? That's it. But what I want to share with you this morning is even though the message of the empty tomb is simple, I believe it's only half the message. And what I want to share with you is something that maybe we don't talk about as much on Easter Sunday, that I believe is the real power of the empty tomb. So, in order to do that, I want to jump to John chapter 20, starting at verse 19. And this is what it says. It says, on the evening, everybody say the evening. Now remember, I made you say the dawn, right? Now, on the evening of the first day of the week, when the disciples were together with doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders. Okay, all of the disciples of Jesus are hanging out together. They're in a room with doors locked. Why are the doors locked? Well, if they can kill the one that we thought was the Messiah, what are they going to do to us? They can take us out quickly. So they're locking the door out of fear that something's going to happen that's out of their control. Because that's what fear is, right? Fear is loss of control. Fear is, I don't know what's going to happen and I don't want to do it. People who are afraid to get on planes are like, I don't want somebody else flying me up in the air that high, right? People who are afraid of the dark, I can't see what happens in the dark. Fear is this thing inside of us that says, I don't have complete control of what's happening to me. And this is where the disciples find themselves. They find themselves with fear in a locked room because they're going to get us and they're going to crucify us too. Okay? Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." They were afraid. They're in a locked room. Suddenly, Jesus is there in the locked room. Did he have a key? Did he just walk through a wall? Was it like a poof? Like there was smoke and all of a sudden Jesus is standing there? I don't know. But the door was locked and now Jesus is in the room. And they're afraid and he's offering them peace. He goes on to say this in verse 20. After he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. Why? Because they were pierced from the cross. He showed them his hands and his side. The disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. Again, Jesus said, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you." He showed up, not with just words, but he said, "Look at me. Touch me. See that I'm real. I'm the real deal. Look at these holes. Look at this side of mine." But it left me with a giant question. And maybe it's not a question you've thought of, or maybe you have. But here was the question that this story left me with. Why did the stone need rolled away if he could walk into a locked room? You ever thought about that? Why do we got to roll a stone away for Jesus to be able to get out when Jesus can just poof into a locked room? What's going on? What's the deal? This doesn't make any sense. Either he can get out on his own or he can't. Well, I believe the answer to the question of why the stone need rolled away is something we've already read. In Matthew 28:6, the angel says to the Marys, "Come and see the place where he lay." See, the stone was rolled away, but it had nothing to do with Jesus getting out. Jesus didn't need the stone to be rolled away to get out of that tomb. The stone was rolled away so that we could see he is no longer dead. The stone was rolled away for you and for me, so that we could step into the tomb and see that it's empty. It had nothing to do with Jesus' ability to get out. It had everything to do with our ability to come and see. He wants to show us the empty tomb. Jesus shows us the empty tomb. He wants us to see that he is no longer dead. Every Easter, we have the same conversation about there's an empty tomb. He's no longer dead. But truthfully, as I've journeyed with Jesus, I have found myself thinking about the empty tomb almost every day of my life. He keeps showing me that he's no longer dead, that there's more to the story than just an empty tomb. But I want to say to you that showing us where he used to be is not enough. It's not enough. I just had the ability to travel overseas. I just got back this week from Greece. And one of the things that I did is I went into a museum of artifacts from 200 BC. They were things they had dug up from people's graves and all kinds of crazy stuff. And in the middle of the exhibit was an empty grave. They had resurrected the whole stone structure, and the inside of it was all painted with murals, because this was someone really important, and so they made their grave super fancy. And all that was laying in the grave, the body wasn't there. They had taken that out, I guess. But it was just some artifacts and this empty block of stone. As I looked at it, if I can be honest with you, not once did I look at it and think to myself, I wonder if that guy's alive. You know what I mean? Like I never looked at the empty tomb or the empty grave and thought to myself, maybe I've met him. Like maybe that dude's walking around right now. You know? Because just because you see an empty space where a dead body used to be doesn't mean much on its own. Are you with me? It's just empty space where a dead body used to be. It's not enough. Folks, I think the powerful message of the story of Jesus and his resurrection is that Jesus shows up in locked rooms. It's not that the tomb is just empty and there used to be a body there. It's that the one who was in the tomb where the body used to be, he's showing up in locked rooms. He's showing up for the people who he's trying to communicate with and share his love with. And I'm telling you, he is showing up in locked rooms all over the place in our world right now. I don't know about you, but I got some locked rooms. There's been times in my life where Jesus has tried to communicate with me and help me grow, and I have said to him, listen, you get all of me, but let me tell you what you don't get, because there's some spaces that are locked. You don't get access to my future. I'm in control of my future. You don't get access to my life as far as the way I live because I'm so prideful that you can't have that part of me. I like the way I am, and you can't change it. Locked room. You don't get access to my money. That's not just a locked room. That's like a vault with a combination, right? You don't get. Don't teach me to be generous. You don't get access to that. See, because here's the deal. I want Jesus to be Lord of my life. I wanted that for so long, but there's so many parts of me that he didn't get access to because they were locked. He would show up in those locked spaces and say, I think we got some work to do in here, and I would remind him where the exit door was. Because I'm not changing. Am I alone? Have you ever experienced that in your own life? Where you know the Lord is calling you to do something. You just can't do it. I don't want to. I locked that room on purpose. And now you're just going to show up in it? Jesus shows up in locked rooms. I believe even as we're having this conversation right now, I hate to say it because I know it'll make you uncomfortable. I think Jesus is entering locked rooms in this room right now. I think just by me even sharing a little bit about what that looks like, your mind is going to what are the places in my life where maybe I'm not letting Jesus be Lord. And right now he's tapping and saying like, hey, you going to let me have this one? You going to let me have this one? I believe there is nothing that can keep Jesus from encountering you. I don't care if you walk in this place with a story that would make all of our jaws drop. There is nothing that you have done or thought or said that stops Jesus from encountering you right now. Right now. But church, I want to make one thing really clear. And this is why I think there's two halves to this story of the empty tomb. Today, we are here to celebrate the empty tomb. However, we worship the risen Jesus. Are you with me? We don't worship the empty tomb. We don't look at an empty tomb and say, oh, the empty tomb, the empty tomb. No. We worship the Jesus who is still alive and is no longer in the empty tomb. We celebrate the empty tomb, but we worship the risen Jesus. And frankly, if I can just be straightforward, I think he is trying to get your attention. Man, there are people in this room who've been going to church here for a long time, who are far from Jesus. And there are people in this room who you showed up today because you got a family brunch afterwards or a lunch when you leave, and you don't want any of this. But here's the truth. Jesus still wants to encounter you. And I believe he's trying to get your attention. So, what do we do? What do we do to move forward? What are the things that we can do to take a next step if we choose to? Well, let me throw 3 things down that I think will help us take a next step. Okay? The first is this: see the empty tomb. Understand that the tomb is empty. Well, Pastor Tim, I'm an atheist, and I don't believe that the tomb was empty. I don't believe that any of this is real. Well, let me help you. Do some research. Because even atheists in the first century acknowledged the empty tomb. They just believed there was another reason for it. Okay? Most scholars throughout history have said we know that tomb was empty. Too many people saw it empty. So you can't argue with me about the empty tomb. We can argue about what happened to Jesus or his body. But the empty tomb was empty. It just was. So see it. See the empty tomb. Consider what that means. That Jesus was dead, and now he's not. That's 1. 2 is really a question. What areas of your life are off limits to God? What are the things in your life? Where are the locked rooms? You all know what they are. You know the things in your life that you're still holding on to, and maybe you even justify it with Scripture. But there are pieces of your life that you're just grabbing onto real tight, and you're like, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to get this right. Man, Jesus wants to interact with you there and wants you to give it to him. What are the areas of your life that you're trying to be your own God? And 3, which I think is the hardest, is choose today to see and believe. Today, Easter Sunday, 2024, you can make a choice today that says, man, I don't have all the answers. I don't know exactly where this is all headed, but I'm going to choose today to see and believe. See and believe what? See and believe that Jesus died on a cross for me. See and believe that he rose from the dead and the tomb is empty. And see and believe that he wants you to see him and be filled with joy and peace. You can surrender your life to him. You can ask for forgiveness. You can repent from your sin and say, Lord, I just want to figure this out with you. Let's see where this goes. You can do that today. You don't have to wait. You don't have to think about it. Today is a day that you can choose to change your life forever and to begin a journey with Jesus. So I'm going to invite the worship team to come on back up. I said this in first service as well. I used to actually be a worship leader before I became a pastor many years ago. And I know what happens when they start moving. Like, I know your brains start to shut down, and I know you start to put stuff away, right? Because you can feel the service is ending. But I'm going to ask you to lock in with me for just a few more minutes. Okay, let's lock in together. Just some things that I want to make sure you hear before you walk away today. The first is this: the empty tomb is for you to come and see that he is not dead. He's not dead. The tomb is empty, but there's more. When you open yourself up to an encounter with him, you truly learn that he is alive. Maybe there's some of you in the room who are like me, like my parents started dragging me to church the moment I don't know, came out of the womb. Like it was just part of my life. Like every Sunday, Sunday mornings, Sunday nights, and Wednesday nights. I don't know if you all are familiar with the 3 times a week schedule, but that was my life, right? And at the age of 2 or 3, I can hear my father saying things to me about Easter Sunday and the resurrection and the importance that the tomb is empty and that Jesus rose from the dead. I remember singing songs like Up from the Grave He Arose, or Because He Lives I Can Face Tomorrow. And it's been a part of my life from childhood. But can I be honest with you? I know there's some deep embedded roots from all that. But it wasn't until I said yes to journey with Jesus. It wasn't until I said yes to journey with Jesus that I understood that he was truly alive. See, we say all the time here, Jesus is changing my life, right? But the kicker is, he has to be alive in order to be changing my life. Not Jesus changed my life because of his death. Jesus is actively changing my life because he's alive. And the truth is every time that I look in the mirror or every time I respond in a way that looks more like him than I look like myself, I'm like, whoa, he's alive. And he is moving in my life. See, if you are struggling with Jesus is actually alive and this is all real, part of the reason you may be struggling is because you haven't surrendered to him. You haven't begun a journey with him. And from the outside looking in, this all looks crazy. But when you say yes to follow Jesus, when you surrender yourself to him, you begin the process of seeing that he's truly alive. It's not about an empty tomb where there's some cloth on where he laid. It's not about that. It's about a real life Jesus who is actively moving in my life, and he's moving in the life of many in this room. If Jesus is moving in your life and you know he's alive, would you just lift your hand right now? Okay, you can put him down. I'm not asking you to do like, oh, everyone look at my hands up. It's not about that. I'm just saying it's not a pastor thing. It's not a pastor thing that Jesus is moving in my life. It's because we're all following him, those of us who have chosen to, that we know that he's alive. How do we know he's alive? The tomb is empty. But how do I really know he's alive? Because he's changing my life. And because he's changing my life, I know he's alive. I know he's alive. When you open yourself up to an encounter with him, you truly learn that he is alive. And because he's alive, he offers us something. See, Jesus faced death and was raised from the dead. He conquered death. And the moment we surrender our life to Jesus, we also move from death to life. Yes, every person in this room, unless the Lord chooses to come back soon, we're all gonna die. Doesn't that make you feel good? Right? Our physical bodies are all going to die. But when you say yes to Jesus, your spirit will live forever. You are resurrected from death. You have conquered death the way Jesus conquered death. You move from death to life because you will spend eternity with the Father, living, not dying. And we get to look at the people around us, the people that we come in contact with, and we get to show them our empty tomb. That there was a place where we were supposed to die, a life that we were supposed to live, that would have ended in destruction and death. I've said this more than one occasion, that if I would not have found Jesus and surrendered my life to him, I know my relationship with my children would be broken. I know that I'd be chasing success in this world and dying inside. There's an empty tomb with that life in it, and I'm not there. Because Jesus has resurrected me into a new living life, and each and every one of you have an empty tomb if you've given your life to the Lord. A place that held you in death that is now empty because you said yes to Jesus. Because of Jesus, death doesn't have to win. It doesn't have to win. So I've got one slide left, and it's the most profound thing I'm going to say all day. You ready? What are you going to do? Like, I'm not going to stand up here and tell you what to do. Y'all got to wrestle with this stuff. You got locked rooms in your life. Jesus is showing up in those locked spaces, asking how much longer you're going to live the way you're living. And you can either point to him where the door is, like I've done 1,000 times, or you can embrace something new and say, you're allowed in this space. It's no longer locked to you. You can choose to look at the empty tomb and to say, I know that Jesus is not dead. And then you can choose to grab onto him and say, I know you're still living and that you can change my life. You can choose that today. What are you going to do? Are you going to hear the message of Jesus and then just go get brunch? Are you going to hear about how he wants to change you? Are you going to hear about how he wants to move in your life and journey with you and go, that was nice, Pastor. Thanks for the message. Y'all, what are you going to do? What do you need to do? I don't know. I'm not the Holy Spirit. I don't know what your next step is. I just know that we shouldn't hear a message like this and say that was nice.